China is reportedly helping Bangladesh in reviving an old World War II airbase at Lalmonirhat. This old British-era base is just 12 to 15 kilometers from the Indian border. The airfield is currently controlled by the Bangladesh Air Force, but it has been inactive for decades. More crucially, this airbase lies just 135 kilometers from the Siliguri Corridor, which is known as India's Chicken's Neck. This Chicken's Neck connects the northeast of the country to the rest of the mainland. Chinese officials recently visited the site in Lalmonirhat, signaling Beijing's growing interest in this project. Although the purpose of reviving this airstrip, whether it will be used for civilian purposes or military reasons, that is still unclear. But what is clear is that such a Chinese presence so close to this narrow passage could increase India's vulnerability. Originally built by the British in 1931, Lalmonirhat served as a forward base for Allied forces in Southeast Asia during World War II. After the partition, Pakistan briefly reopened this airstrip in 1958 for civilian use. Since then, it has been largely abandoned despite its sprawling 1,100 acres and facilities which include a 4-kilometer runway and a large tarmac. Back in 2019, Bangladesh's then Sheikh Hasina government had announced plans to develop an aviation and aerospace university in Lalmonirhat, but now it's operational under the Bangladesh Air Force. Recently, the interim administration, led by Professor Muhammad Yunus, proposed reviving Lalmonirhat and 5 other British-era airports to boost the local economy there. Those other airports include Ishwardi, Thakurgaon, Shamshernagar, Comilla and Bogra. The Siliguri Corridor, which is known as the Chicken's Neck, is the only land route connecting India's northeast to the rest of the mainland of the country. At its narrowest point, the Chicken's Neck is merely 22 kilometers wide, making it a strategic choke point for India. It is a lifeline, which is the only road and rail link that connects India's 8 northeastern states to the mainland. The corridor's security is vital. If the reports of potential Chinese involvement in developing this Bangladeshi airbase, possibly as a civilian airport, is true, then it could be a direct threat to the Chicken's Neck. The fears always persist that the revival of this airbase could serve dual civilian and military purposes. This could enable China to monitor Indian military movements or even gather intelligence close to the Siliguri Corridor. Any disruption to this lifeline could threaten India's territorial integrity. China's expanding military presence near the India-Bhutan-China tri-junction has already heightened tensions. In fact, if you remember, the 2017 Doklam standoff exposed the vulnerabilities of the Siliguri Corridor, pushing India to further strengthen its defenses there. China's growing footprint in Bangladesh includes not just military interests but also economic projects. Chinese companies are building factories and also a solar power plant near Rangpur and a satellite city there as well. These factories are operated almost entirely by Chinese personnel. There's very minimal involvement from local workers. This is a pattern that is similar to what has been seen in Chinese projects in Pakistan and in Sri Lanka. It leads to an alienation of the local population, which view this as inimical to their own job opportunities. Chinese firms are also deeply involved in regional infrastructure and connectivity efforts very close to India's border. One thing is, China has definitive plans for the South Asian region, particularly around India's northeast. And all this while those plans may have been dormant because Bangladesh was ruled for a very long time, over a decade and a half, by former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who of course was more accommodative towards India's interests. Now with the regime change there in Dhaka and Muhammad Yunus making an open offer that Bangladesh can be a fountainhead against India, China would definitely be tempted to take up the airport project. India is also watching Bangladesh warming up in its ties with both China and Pakistan. And this, of course, is being viewed with a degree of concern in South Bloc. Before Chinese officials visited Lalmonirhat, a Pakistani military intelligence delegation also inspected some of the border areas of Bangladesh. We have seen a warming of ties between Islamabad and Dhaka, including military delegations going from Islamabad to Dhaka. The Pakistani spy agency ISI historically has had close links with armed separatist groups in India's northeast, many of whom were operating from Bangladesh, until there was a crackdown that was launched by the then Awami League government headed by Hasina in 2009. So for the last decade plus, India's northeast has relatively seen very few big-ticket attacks from these insurgent groups, particularly those groups like Alpha, which had safe sanctuary in Bangladesh. Bangladesh has also initiated the construction of the Matarbari deep-sea port in collaboration with Japanese firms. This is the first such facility in the entire Bay of Bengal. This project is funded through Japan's official development assistance program. Separately, China is also advancing the development of the Kyapkyu deep-sea port in Myanmar's Rakhine state. This is again part of the China-Myanmar economic corridor under the Belt and Road Initiative. This port, too, is strategically significant, providing China with direct access to the Bay of Bengal. But this is not the only port development in Bangladesh which has been caught in the global crossfire. Earlier, the St. Martin's Island, Bangladesh's only coral island, had been at the center of geopolitical back and forth. Former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had alleged that the United States had pressured her to concede control of the St. Martin Island, and that she refused to do so, and that she believed was one of the reasons why she was ousted from power. However, both the US government at that time under Joe Biden and also Hasina's own son, Saeed Wajid, have denied these claims. Muhammad Yunus, who's now the interim leader of Bangladesh, recently visited China. He's managed to secure commitments totaling over $2 billion in investments from China into Bangladesh. During his visit, Yunus also emphasized Bangladesh being in a strategic position as a maritime gateway. He suggested in that speech that India's northeastern states are effectively landlocked, and he highlighted Bangladesh's potential role in helping China develop regional trade. That comment did not go down well with New Delhi. India even summoned a senior Bangladeshi High Commission official and issued a démarche. Bangladesh's growing ties with China, particularly in strategic infrastructure projects like airstrips and ports, may prompt even the United States to reassess its engagement in the region. For now, just as India is watching its western flank with Pakistan, it will also need to pay serious attention to its eastern flank, particularly if there is a commonality of strategy between Beijing and Dhaka, which involves Islamabad as well.